My name is Nicole Carter. I'm 34 years old and 3 months before Christmas. I moved back to New York after spending nearly a decade building a life far enough away from my family that their opinions could no longer control me. At least that was what I told myself. The apartment I chose had floor-to-ceiling windows that faced away from the street where I grew up. The truth was that I still wanted them to see me as successful, especially after my consulting contract ended unexpectedly, and my younger brother began calling my move home a retreat. On Christmas Eve, I arrived at my mother's house carrying 6 carefully wrapped gifts, a designer handbag she had admired, and an envelope containing the final payment for my brother's overdue property taxes. My mother opened the door, but didn't let me step inside. "We decided it would be better if you didn't join us this year," she said. The porch light cast her shadow across the threshold like a wall between us. Before I could ask why, my brother appeared behind her, looked at the gifts in my arms, and smiled. This is no place for losers. I waited for my mother to defend me. Instead, her eyes dropped to the envelope in my hand. That was when I understood. They didn't want me at their table, but they still expected my money. I nodded, carried everything back to my car, returned every gift, canceled the tax payment, and froze the credit card my brother used for so-called family emergencies. Within an hour, he sent 17 messages. The last one read, "You have no idea what you just destroyed." He was right. I didn't know my money had been holding together a marriage, a house, and a network of lies that was about to collapse. Before I tell you what he did next and why a lawyer called me weeks later, tell me what time it is where you are and where you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels tonight. I drove away from my mother's house with both hands locked around the steering wheel while a cheerful Christmas song played on the radio. For 3 blocks, I refused to cry. Then my vision blurred. A delivery van stopped in front of me, and I slammed on the brakes so hard that the gifts crashed against the back seats. A horn screamed behind me. I sat frozen, realizing I had nearly caused an accident over people who had just told me I wasn't worthy of sitting at their table. I pulled into a parking lot, shut off the radio, and opened my banking app. An $8,400 payment was scheduled to cover Ethan's property taxes. Beneath it were transfers for his children's private school, my mother's utilities, and charges from the emergency credit card I had given him. Restaurants, sports tickets, and a hotel in Atlantic City appeared among the supposed emergencies. I canceled the tax payment, suspended the credit card, removed Ethan as an authorized user from an investment account, and stopped every recurring transfer. It took less than 5 minutes to end a financial arrangement that had drained me for years. Ethan had always known how to turn his failures into my responsibilities. When his business supposedly collapsed, I sent him $15,000. When he lost his job, I covered 4 months of mortgage payments. When our mother needed dental surgery, he created a family group chat about sharing the burden, then contributed nothing. Every time I hesitated, he reminded me that I was unmarried and childless. "What else do you need your money for?" he once asked. I had laughed to hide how much it hurt. The answer was simple: my own life. I had been saving for a home, stability, and the freedom to leave work that exhausted me. Instead, I had spent those savings buying temporary approval. At my apartment, I arranged the gifts across the floor. There was a gaming console for Ethan, a designer handbag for my mother, tablets for the children, and a restored childhood photograph of Ethan and me sitting on the steps of our old house. I was 12. He was 7 and his hand was wrapped around mine. Back then, he followed me everywhere and waited outside my room when he had nightmares. I wondered when he had learned to measure love by what he could extract from people and when I had learned to excuse him. The next morning, I returned everything except the photograph. More than $7,000 went back onto my card. When the cashier asked why, I said, the people receiving them changed their minds about wanting me around. I used some of the refund to book 3 nights at a quiet hotel overlooking the Hudson. The first holiday decision I had made entirely for myself. That evening, I placed the note attached to the childhood photograph in a metal bowl. It read, "No matter how far life takes us, we will always take care of each other." I burned the note, not the photograph, and posted a picture of the empty gift boxes with one sentence. Sometimes the most loving gift you can give yourself is a closed wallet and an open door. Ethan viewed it within minutes. His first message called me dramatic. His second demanded the tax money. His third said the children would suffer because of me. Then my 9-year-old niece video called and asked, "Are you mad at us?" I told her I loved her and that the adults were handling a disagreement. She looked over her shoulder and whispered, "Dad said you're trying to make us homeless." I ended the call before she could see my expression. Seconds later, Ethan texted, "Now you see what your tantrum is doing." He had used his own daughter to pressure me. I sent one final reply, "Do not involve the children. I will no longer pay your bills, fund your lifestyle, or accept insults in exchange for being included in this family. Any future communication about money must be in writing." He answered, "You think you can walk away after everything we invested in you? That money wasn't charity. You owe us." The wording disturbed me. My family had never financed my education or career, yet Ethan sounded as though he were preparing a legal argument. I took screenshots, downloaded years of bank statements, and created a folder called Family Transfers. I thought I was protecting myself from manipulation. I didn't know I was beginning an evidence file. Ethan arrived at my apartment at 7:12 the next morning, pounding the buzzer until I answered. "Open the door, Nicole," he demanded. I told him to leave, but he threatened to create a scene in the lobby. So, I opened the building entrance while keeping the chain across my apartment door. He pushed against it the moment I cracked it open. His hair was uncombed, his eyes were bloodshot, and he wore the same sweater from Christmas Eve. "You canceled the payment," he said. He didn't apologize or ask how I was. His first concern was the money. "You said there was no place for losers," I replied. "Why should a loser finance your house?" He said the payment had already been promised. When I asked to whom, he ignored me and ordered me to reactivate the credit card. I mentioned the restaurants, sports tickets, and Atlantic City Hotel. His expression changed. "You went through my charges?" he asked. "There were charges on my account." He began pacing, then struck the door with his palm. "You're my sister. You're supposed to help." I told him help was freely offered, not demanded through humiliation. He leaned toward the gap and said, "You don't get to decide when this arrangement ends." I activated the recorder on my phone. "What arrangement?" I asked. Realizing he had said too much, Ethan changed tactics. He claimed the Christmas insult had been a joke and that our mother excluded me because she thought I would be embarrassed about losing my job. I told him I had already accepted a better position beginning in January. He had heard that my contract ended and turned it into a story about failure because it made him feel superior. When sympathy failed, he accused me of thinking I was better than the family. I reminded him that years earlier, he had sabotaged a job opportunity by telling a recruiter I was emotionally unstable. He claimed he had been protecting me from moving too far away. "You didn't protect me," I said. "You couldn't stand the idea that I might succeed without needing you. And yet you came crawling back," he sneered. I explained that I returned to New York by choice, and that my new salary would never benefit him. His face tightened. He asked whether I was cutting off our mother, too. I said I might pay legitimate medical providers directly, but I would never again transfer unrestricted money through him. Then he repeated his favorite argument. "You're single. You don't have children. What do you even need all that money for?" I looked through the narrow opening and answered, "My life." Ethan laughed and said I had no real life, only an apartment, a laptop, and a job that could disappear. He warned that the family would be the only people available when I ended up alone. Being alone is not the same as being used. I said, "You rejected me, not my money. Now you get neither." He pushed the door again. I told him the conversation was being recorded and that security would be called. He stepped back and glanced at the hallway camera. "You're recording your own brother?" he asked, suddenly pretending to be hurt. "I'm documenting someone demanding money and hitting my door." Before leaving, he said, "When the bank takes the house, when Rachel leaves, and when Mom finds out what you've done, that will all be on you." I asked why his wife would leave over one canceled payment. He froze, said I misunderstood, and hurried toward the elevator. His accidental confession remained with me. He wasn't worried about a temporary shortage. He believed his marriage would collapse if my money stopped. An hour later, Ethan posted on Facebook that a close relative had abandoned 2 children during a financial crisis out of jealousy. Our mother commented, "Some people forget where they came from." Ethan replied, "Money changes people." I saved screenshots and said nothing. By afternoon, he tagged me directly and demanded that I explain why family meant nothing to me. Instead of responding, I sent everything to an attorney named Laura Bennett. She told me not to speak with Ethan by phone, not to delete anything, and not to pay another $1 until we understood why he kept using words like agreement and owe. That night, my mother left several voicemails ordering me to restore the tax payment. Her last message was quieter. "Nicole, there are things you don't understand. Please don't force Ethan to explain them." That sentence confirmed she knew there was a secret. They had not kept me outside because they believed I was a failure. They had kept me outside because something inside that house could have exposed why they needed my money. For 3 days, Ethan continued his public campaign. He posted photographs of the children wearing clothes I had purchased, shared articles about narcissistic siblings, and accused me of choosing a luxury city life over family. Relatives sent messages demanding that I forgive him. I ignored them and documented everything. Silence was difficult because my niece believed I was making her homeless. But Laura warned that emotional responses could be edited and used against me. Rachel called on Thursday night. I nearly ignored her until she texted, "Please answer. Ethan is gone and the bank called again." When I picked up, she was breathing so quickly that I asked whether she needed an ambulance. She said the bank had begun foreclosure proceedings and admitted they were 8 mortgage payments behind. One canceled Christmas transfer could not explain that. I asked where Ethan had been sending the money I gave him. Rachel went silent, then confessed she had never known how much I paid. Ethan told her he occasionally received help for the children, but claimed the mortgage and taxes came from commissions. I opened my family transfers folder and read the amounts aloud. $15,000 for a business, $9,500 for taxes, $12,000 for water damage, and $6,000 for a child's medical procedure. Rachel said there had been no water damage, and insurance had covered the procedure. Ethan had invented emergencies and used his children's health to take money from me. Rachel asked for my records, but I told her Laura would review what could be shared. Then Rachel revealed why I had been kept outside on Christmas Eve. There had been no dinner. She had been upstairs packing after finding a second phone in Ethan's car. The phone contained messages with another woman and hotel charges from a credit card Rachel didn't recognize. Ethan knew I was arriving with the tax payment and feared Rachel would tell me the truth before I handed it over. He convinced our mother that I had lost my job and might ask them for money, then asked her to keep me outside. The hotel charges on my emergency card had financed his affair. Rachel said Ethan had punched a hole in the laundry room door after discovering I froze the card. He blamed her for turning me against him, even though we had not spoken. I told her to take the children somewhere safe, photograph important documents, and contact someone she trusted. I would help protect the children, but I would not reopen my wallet. Rachel admitted she had ignored warning signs because every crisis eventually disappeared. Bills were suddenly paid, overdue notices vanished, and Ethan claimed he had received a bonus. In reality, he called me. Soon afterward, Rachel sent photographs of documents from Ethan's locked desk, overdue notices, payday loan agreements, credit card statements, and letters from a private lender. One document listed me as a guarantor. The signature resembled mine, but it was wrong. I had never seen or authorized the loan. I forwarded it to Laura, who told me not to contact Ethan. The situation was no longer merely a family dispute. The following morning, Ethan deleted his Facebook posts and messaged, "Rachel is confused. Don't believe her." My mother called the forgery a misunderstanding and said I shouldn't ruin his life over bad paperwork. Her defense showed she knew more than she admitted. That afternoon, a man named Mark Dawson left a voicemail regarding financial agreements between Nicole and Ethan Carter. Laura called him and learned Ethan was claiming the money I sent was repayment of an old family debt. He said he had documents proving it. Mark Dawson represented Ethan. During a conference call with Laura present, he claimed our parents had financed my education, moved to Chicago, and early career. In return, I had supposedly agreed to support Ethan and our mother until his children finished school. My years of payments were presented as proof. The story was completely false. I paid for college through scholarships, loans, and restaurant work. My employer covered my move. Yet, Ethan had produced a signed acknowledgement stating that I accepted $120,000 in family support and agreed to repay it. The document was dated 6 years earlier and claimed I signed it in New York before a witness. I had been attending a conference in Denver. The witness was my mother. I called her and asked whether she had seen me sign it. After a long silence, she admitted Ethan brought her the document and claimed it was for tax purposes. "Then you lied as a witness," I said. She began crying, but when I mentioned the forgery, affair, and foreclosure, her sympathy vanished. Rachel had no right to go through his things, she snapped. She knew enough to understand what Ethan was hiding. When I asked why she helped him, she said, "He wouldn't have needed to do any of this if you had helped without making him beg." That was when I stopped seeing her as a confused mother caught between two children. She believed his desperation justified taking from me. Laura disputed the debt, demanded the original documents, and helped me freeze my credit. 2 unauthorized inquiries appeared, one from a private lender and another from a business financing company. The private loan had been issued to Ethan's company with an outstanding balance of $86,000, and I was listed as guarantor. The lender also had an email sent from my account confirming my responsibility. Months earlier, I had logged into my email on my mother's computer and forgotten to sign out. Ethan had access to that house. He had used fragments of my information gathered over years to construct a false financial identity. Mark proposed a settlement. Ethan would abandon the claim that I owed family support if I paid the $86,000 loan and resumed the children's tuition. Laura replied that we were prepared to provide travel records, handwriting analysis, login data, statements, and Ethan's recorded threats to investigators. Within 20 minutes, Ethan called from a blocked number. He accused me of breaking a promise to protect the children and warned that if the forgery became criminal, our mother could face consequences too. He was using her involvement as a shield. "You should have considered that before asking her to witness a forged document," I said. Rachel later contacted me from a new number. She had taken the children to her sister's home after Ethan accused her of stealing evidence. Before leaving, she copied his second phone. It contained messages with an underground gambling organizer, an aggressive private lender, and the woman he had been seeing. Ethan owed more than $300,000. Rachel asked to meet at a cafe and said she had found a spreadsheet listing every debt, lie, and person he had used. My name appeared repeatedly. So did our mothers. Rachel looked exhausted when I met her at the cafe. She pushed a thick envelope toward me containing statements, screenshots, hotel receipts, loan papers, and a spreadsheet hidden under the name Q4 Sales. It tracked debts, deadlines, and possible sources of money. Beside my name, Ethan had written, "Reliable but emotional. Use kids." Beside our mother's name, "House equity if necessary." He had reduced our relationships to manipulation strategies. Rachel explained that his gambling began with sports betting and grew into cash advances, business credit cards, payday loans, and private lenders. The business I funded had never truly operated. Ethan registered a company and created a website. But most of my $15,000 paid gambling debts. The burst pipe and medical emergency were fictional. Even the Christmas property tax request was only partly true. Ethan needed the money to satisfy a lender threatening to contact his employer. I remembered the day he asked for business capital. He called from his car and said he wanted to build something his children could be proud of. Later, he sent me a photograph of an office with his company logo on the glass. Rachel revealed that the office belonged to a friend. Ethan had rented the room for an hour and taped a printed logo to the door. He had understood exactly which version of himself I wanted to save. The affair lasted 18 months. Ethan told the other woman he was separated and wealthy, then used my card to pay for hotels, jewelry, and trips. Meanwhile, he told Rachel they needed to reduce spending because I had become unreliable. He portrayed both of us as problems while using our money to support his lies. Rachel apologized for believing that I enjoyed being needed and admitted she had accepted easy explanations because their lifestyle exceeded their income. I told her I would cooperate with her attorney and help protect the children, but I would not pay the mortgage, school tuition, gambling debts, or legal expenses. Rachel said she was filing for divorce and requesting temporary custody until Ethan received treatment. She then showed me messages between Ethan and our mother. They had planned to keep me at the house only long enough to receive the tax envelope, then send me away. Ethan rejected that plan because he feared Rachel would confront me. His message read, "I'll have Mom keep her outside. Nicole caves when Mom looks disappointed." Our mother responded with a thumbs up. The closed door had been planned. Rachel also found pending loan applications using variations of my personal information. One had been approved for $42,000 through a shell company Ethan controlled. I sent copies to Laura. Closing my wallet had interrupted the system that protected every lie. The unpaid tax bill exposed the mortgage. The mortgage exposed the gambling. The gambling exposed the loans. The loans exposed the forgery. Before we could leave, Ethan entered the cafe. He had tracked Rachel through their daughter's tablet, which remained in her bag. "Give me the envelope," he demanded. I activated my recorder under the table. Rachel told him the children were safe with her sister. Ethan accused us of destroying the family over one joke. I replied that one joke had not created $300,000 in debt, forged signatures, an affair, or foreclosure. He began pleading. He called gambling an illness, promised the affair was over, and claimed a future commission would repay everything. Rachel played a recording of his manager confirming that no major commission existed and that Ethan was already under investigation for suspicious expenses. His face emptied. Rachel then told him she had filed for divorce and requested temporary custody. She removed her wedding ring and placed it on the table. Ethan lost control. He struck the table and shouted, "Nicole promised to help us!" I asked why he needed a forged document if the promise was real. He froze and noticed my phone. Then he warned that exposing him would also implicate our mother because she had helped with the paper and email access. "You keep naming people who will suffer because of choices you made." I said the children, Rachel, Mom, and me. "You never name yourself." His anger collapsed into desperation. Ethan asked me for $100,000 to clear the dangerous debts. He promised treatment, repayment, and a public apology. I asked whether he would still seek help if I gave him nothing. He didn't answer. When he reached for Rachel's wrist, the cafe manager approached and ordered him to leave. At the door, he warned that everyone would soon see what I really was. "They're about to see what you did," I answered. The consequences came in waves. Laura provided the forged documents, login records, statements, and recordings to the appropriate institutions. Rachel's attorney submitted evidence of hidden debt, tracking, threats, and financial instability during the temporary custody hearing. I did not create Ethan's punishment. I simply stopped protecting him from it.
His employer investigated his expense reports and discovered altered receipts, false sales claims, and personal charges disguised as client meetings. He was suspended, then fired. Ethan posted online that his vindictive sister had cost him his career, even though I had never contacted his company. Blaming me allowed him to avoid admitting that his own records exposed him.
The house followed. The mortgage had been unpaid too long. Taxes were delinquent, and creditors had placed liens against the property. Rachel and the children were given time to remove their belongings before the house was listed. Ethan said I had stolen his children's home. In reality, I had only stopped financing the illusion that he could afford it. Rachel received temporary primary custody, while the court reviewed Ethan's financial conduct, living situation, and treatment plan. His visits were temporarily supervised. I did not celebrate that outcome. The children loved their father, but I felt relief that he could no longer use them as messengers and bargaining tools. When my niece asked whether I could buy their house, I understood how deeply the family had learned to view my money as the emergency exit. I told her that homes could change while love remained. But I would not buy the property. My mother demanded that I withdraw the fraud complaints. She said a good daughter would protect her from the consequences of witnessing the false document. A good mother would not help one child steal from another, I replied. She claimed she had only wanted to keep the family together. I reminded her that she had stood between me and the family on Christmas Eve while waiting for my money. You didn't keep me included, I said. You kept me useful. Family, Wes. Favell family. Family Christmas Eve while waiting for my money. You didn't keep me included, I said. You kept me useful. She allowed Ethan to move into her house and told relatives she would help him rebuild. Within a month, she called me crying. Ethan had taken her car, pressured her to borrow against the house, and accused her of betrayal when she refused. The behavior she tolerated when directed at me became unbearable when it reached her wallet. She asked me to intervene. I told her to protect her accounts, change her passwords, and contact professionals. But I would not rescue Ethan again. Mark Dawson eventually withdrew Ethan's claim that I owed a family debt. His office stated that it had relied on information supplied by its client. The private lender suspended collection efforts against me. The unauthorized applications were flagged and my credit remained frozen. Not every financial problem disappeared immediately, but I was finally protecting my future instead of financing Ethan's past. Ethan later posted an apology video admitting that gambling had harmed people he loved. For 30 seconds, he sounded sincere. Then he blamed relatives who had supposedly used money to control him and accused Rachel of turning his illness into a legal weapon. A former colleague asked why addiction required forged signatures. Another creditor called him a liar. His mistress commented that he had told her Rachel was dead. Ethan deleted the video, but relatives had already saved it. People who once accused me of cruelty began apologizing. I accepted a few apologies and ignored the rest. Anyone willing to condemn me without asking a question no longer deserved automatic access to my life. 2 months after Christmas, Ethan appeared in the lobby of my office. Security remained nearby while I agreed to hear him. He looked thinner and older. He admitted lying about the business, repairs, medical bill, email access, and loan guarantee. He said treatment had helped him understand the damage he caused. Then he asked for $18,000 to pay a dangerous lender. The amount was smaller, but the pattern was identical: urgency, secrecy, guilt, and the promise that one final payment would solve everything. "No," I said. He claimed the lender might hurt him. I told him to contact law enforcement, his lawyer, or his treatment provider. He accused me of taking his wife, children, career, house, and reputation. I let him finish. "I didn't place a bet," I said. "I didn't forge a signature, lie to your wife, mislead your employer, or manipulate your children." I closed my wallet. Everything that happened afterward was already waiting behind it. He asked how I could be so cold, because I finally understand the difference between compassion and participation. I replied, "I hope you recover, but I will not fund the behavior destroying you." When he asked whether I would ever forgive him, I said, "Maybe, but forgiveness does not mean restored access, erased consequences, or another loan." I expected revenge to feel triumphant. Instead, freedom was quiet. It was waking without checking whether Ethan needed money. It was watching my salary remain in my account. It was buying a small apartment in my own name and spending time with my niece and nephew without the afternoon becoming a request for cash. It was accepting that my mother might never repair everything she had broken. Months later, she asked to meet. Ethan had left her house after she refused to refinance it. She admitted that she favored him because he always seemed to need her, while my independence made her assume I needed nothing. I told her that competence was not permission to exploit someone. She apologized for the Christmas rejection, the false witness signature, and the years of expecting me to finance family peace. I said trust would have to be rebuilt through actions. For once, she did not ask me to make the process easier for her. Rachel moved into a smaller rental, returned to work, and transferred the children to a more affordable school. Ethan entered a structured treatment program and began rebuilding supervised contact with them. Whether his recovery lasted was no longer my responsibility. The following Christmas, Rachel invited me to dinner. My mother attended under clear boundaries. Ethan was not there. I arrived with modest gifts and no checks. My niece opened the door and wrapped her arms around me. No one inspected what I carried. No one asked me to pay a bill. No one called me a loser. Money had never purchased my family's love. It purchased silence, delayed consequences, and protected lies. When I stopped paying, I did not destroy the family. I exposed what my money had been hiding. I still keep the childhood photograph of Ethan and me in a drawer. I never burned it. The little boy in that photograph was real. And so was the love I once felt for him. But a memory is not a contract. It does not require me to sacrifice my future to protect the adult he chose to become. The night Ethan told me there was no place for losers, I thought my family was throwing me away. In reality, they were releasing me from a role I should never have accepted. I returned the gifts. I closed my wallet. And for the first time in my life, I opened the door to a future I had chosen for myself, not one purchased with borrowed approval.